Колеги, доброго дня. Мене звати Hlib Vyshlinsky, я виконавчий директор Центру
Dear
економічної
colleagues,
стратегії. Ми
greetings. My
починаємо
name is Hlib
наш
Vyshlinsky. I'm a
щомісячний
CEO
захід,
of the
присвячений ситуації в
CES,
українській
and today we
економіці
start
під
our
час
monthly
російського
event
повномасштабного
about the
вторгнення.
situation in Ukrainian
Цю серію
economy
заходів
during
ми проводимо
full-scale
спільно з
invasion of the
нашим
Russian
партнером з Europe
Federation.
Economic
This
Team.
series of
І
workshops is
темою
facilitated
сьогоднішнього заходу,
along with our partners
як
from
я
German Economic
написав на
Team.
Фейсбуці,
And the
тема
topic of our today event, as you
щорічна тема
probably have seen
щомісячного
in our
заходу.
Facebook
Власне,
post,
це
it's our
бюджет на
annual
наступний
topic of
рік,
monthly event.
бюджет
The budget
2025,
for the
армія,
next year,
податки,
budget
російські активи.
2022, army, taxes,
For
and
those
Russian
of you
assets.
who want to listen our event in English, please turn on English translation in the bottom bar of Zoom. Повертаємося на українську мову і українську
Now I'll be
розмову.
talking in
Ще
Ukrainian.
один
So
технічний
let's start
момент.
our Ukrainian
Якщо у вас
discussion.
є
Another
питання, то, будь
technical
ласка,
housekeeping
залишайте
issue.
їх за
If you have
можливості
any
в
questions,
розділі
please feel
Q&A,
free
особливо
to
це
ask
стосується
them in
технічних
the
питань до
Q&A section.
презентації,
It's
тому що в цьому
especially
розділі
true
можна
for technical issues
безпосередньо
about
давати
our
відповідь на
presentation,
питання і
because
закривати
in
ці
this
уточнення
section,
для
thus
вас
we
і
can
для
directly
спікерів є
respond to our
більше
questions.
ймовірності
It's
того,
comfortable both
що
for
ваші
us and
питання
for our speakers,
отримають
so there is a
швидку
high
відповідь.
chance that your questions will be
Зараз я хотів би
promptly
передати
responded.
слово
And now I
для
would like to give a
вступного
floor
виступу нашого
for
колегу Гарі
opening remarks
Полушкіна, який
to
є
our
проектним
colleague
менеджером
Garry
German Economic Team
Poluschkin,
по Україні. Гарі, прошу.
who's a project
Доброго
management. Garry,
дня з
please, the floor
Берліна.
is
Мене
yours.
звати Гаррі Полушкін.
Hello,
Мені дуже
everyone.
приємно
My name is
оголосити
Garry Poluschkin.
сьогоднішній
It's a real
вебінар.
pleasure for me
Я
to
координатор по
open
Україні
today's
німецько-економічної
webinar.
команди.
I'm
Цей
a
проєкт
Ukrainian
фінансується
coordinator of German
Федеральним
Economic
міністерством
Team.
економіки та
This
захисту
project
клімату
is funded
та
by the
консультує
Federal
уряду України з
Department
питань
Office of
економічної
Economy and
політики перші
Protection. We
15
provide
років.
consultation to Ukraine
З
on economic
початком
policy. We
повномасштабної
have been doing
війни
it for over
ми
15 years. When the
СЕС
full-scale invasion
організовуємо
started,
щомісячні вебінари, які
we
надають
organized
важливу
monthly
можливість
workshops
обговорити стан
to
економіки,
provide the
що є
important
регулярною
possibility
частиною
to
цього
discuss the
заходу
condition in Ukrainian
та
economy, which is a
специфічною
regular
темою.
part of our today event and
Сьогодні
a very
наша тема
specific topic.
бюджету 25-го року.
Today, our topic is budget
Доходи
for
майже не зросли, в
2025.
той час як
Revenues have
видатки,
almost
особливо на
not
оборону,
increased,
різко
while
зросли.
budget
Це
spending, especially military
призвело до
spendings,
дефіциту
have increased
бюджету
significantly.
еквівалентного
This results in a
приблизно
budget
38
deficiency,
мільярдів
which is
доларів.
equivalent of
Як
approximately
можна профінансувати цей
$38 million.
дефіцит?
How
Які
this deficit
інструменти
can be
доступні?
funded? What are some of the tools
Це
available
важливе
for this purpose?
питання сьогоднішньої
It's a very
дискусії.
important
Я
question,
дуже
and
вдячний
it's
за
up for
цю
us to
тему.
answer it during our today
Дуже
discussions. I
дякую.
highly appreciate this topic. Thank you so much.
Дякую, Гаррі. Зараз переходимо до
Thank you,
першої
Harry.
частини
And today we will start with
нашого
the first
стандартного
part
щомісячного
of
формату.
our
Давайте
standard
подивимося, що
monthly
відбувалося
format.
з українською
Let's take a
економікою
look
в
at
листопаді.
what has been
І
happening with
я
Ukrainian
передаю слово
economy
моїм
in
колегам.
November.
Перший, як
And
завжди,
now I
починає
would like
менеджер
to give a floor
цього
to
нашого проекту
my colleagues.
Максим Самойлюк, наш
And
економіст, який
first will be the
представить
manager of our
ситуацію
project, Maksym
в
Samoiliuk, our
економіці
economist,
загалом,
who
а
will
також
present the
в
situation in
нашому
economy
фінансовому
in
секторі. Максиме,
general
прошу.
and in
Дякую,
monetary and
Глібе.
financial
Вітаю
sector.
всіх
Thank you,
глядачів нашого
Maxim.
сьогоднішнього заходу.
Hello, Gleb.
Перед тим, як ми перейдемо до
Greetings, dear
спеціальної теми
participants.
бюджет
And
25-го
before
року
we,
та
we
до
start with special
дискусії,
topic
коротко
budget 2025
поглянемо,
and
що
our discussion,
відбулося з
let
економікою
me give
України за
you a brief
останній
overview
місяць.
of what's been happening in the economy of Ukraine
ВВП
over the
за
last few
11
months.
місяців 2024 року
So,
зріс на
during the 11
4%.
months
Це
of
повідомляє Міністерство економіки.
2024, the
В
GDP, we
листопаді
witnessed
ВВП
GDP
зріс
growth
на
by
0,9% рік
4%.
до
It's
року.
reported by the Ministry of
Таке
Economy.
зростання вже
In November,
перевищує
GDP increased
річний
by
прогноз НБУ,
0.9%
який
year on year.
очікує, що
This
ВВП
growth by the end
зросте
of
на
2024
4% за
will likely be
підсумками року.
higher
Тобто
than
можна очікувати, що
4.0% as forecasted by the
справді
NBU.
реальність виявиться
It means that we
оптимістичнішою
can
за
expect
прогнозом.
that the reality will be
Серед
more optimistic
ключових
than the
чинників,
forecast.
які
The key
стимулюють
drivers
відновлення економіки, досі залишаються
that
транспортна та будівельна галузі,
drive this economic growth are still
виробництво і
transport and
особливо
construction,
промисловий
manufacturing,
комплекс,
and
а також внутрішня торгівля.
especially defense
До
industry and
кращого
domestic
відновлення
trade.
економіки та ВВП, ніж очікувалось, також доклалося
For
те,
better
що
recovery, the better recovery
дефіцит
of economy is
електроенергії
also
є
complemented by the
меншим,
fact that
ніж
deficit of
прогнозувалося
electroenergy
до
is less
початку
than
опалювального
expected
сезону. А також,
before
як
fitting
повідомляє
season,
НБУ, на початку
as the NBU reports.
збору ранніх зернових врожаї були трохи кращими, ніж
The
очікувалося.
yield, the agricultural yield,
На жаль,
was
в
better than
листопаді
expected.
погіршилися очікувані бізнесу.
Unfortunately,
Вони
in
скоротилися
September,
до
business
47,2 пунктів
expectations
і
deteriorated, and
залишилися
right
нижче
now
нейтрального рівня.
they,
Це
they are
означає, що
decreased to
серед
47.2
бізнесу
and they are lower than neutral level.
превалює
It
негативне
means that
очікування щодо
there are
розвитку
prevailing
економіки в
negative
наступний рік.
expectations among
В
businesses
усіх
regarding economic
опитуваних НБУ
development
секторах
next
очікування
year. In
погіршилися.
all sectors
На
surveyed
першу
by
чергу
NBU, the
через
expectations
те, що
deteriorated. First of
погіршується
all,
динаміка бойових дій,
due
а
to
також
worse
все-таки,
dynamics on
незважаючи
the
на
battlefield,
позитивні прогнози чи
and
очікування,
even despite
дефіцит
some positive
електроенергії
forecasts,
зберігається
the
та
power deficit
поновилося
is still in
відключення
the country,
електроенергії, особливо
and
для
resumption of
бізнесу.
power outages,
І
especially
ми
for
вважаємо,
commercial
що
consumers,
саме
also
ситуація з
contribute towards
електроенергією
sentiment.
вплине на
We
те,
believe
як
that the
розвиватиметься
energy
очікування
situation
бізнесу
will
в
especially
зимові
affect
місяці.
the
Чи
business
вони
sentiment's
суттєво
development
обанкротяться,
during
чи
winter months.
триматимуть
They will
марки
either
минулого рівня.
reduce significantly or they may remain
Декілька слів
stable.
про монетарний сектор
Now,
та
let me
ситуацію
tell
на
you a few
валютному
words
ринку.
about monetary sector
В
and
листопаді
the
інфляція
foreign
прискорилася до
exchange market.
11,2%,
So in November,
і
inflation accelerated to 11.2%.
внаслідок цього буквально
As
сьогодні,
a result
годину
of
тому,
which,
Національний банк
today, just an hour
підвищив
ago, the
облікову
National
ставку до
Bank of Ukraine
13,5%,
increased the key
щоб
rate to
зберегти
13.5%
стабільність
in order
цінову
to
та
maintain
втримати
the price
інфляцію
stability
під
and keep
контролем.
the
НБУ
inflation
планує
under
поступово
control. NBU is
повертати
planning to
інфляцію до рівня таргету
slowly
5%
raise the
і
inflation to
очікує,
target
що
level of
вже на початку
5%,
наступного року
and they expect
інфляційний
that
тренд
early
зміниться
next
і
year the
інфляція
inflation
почне
trend will
спадати.
change, and the inflation
Така
will finally
зміна
decrease.
облікової ставки допоможе
This increase in
підтримати
the key rate
дохідність,
policy
реальну
rate
дохідність
will
гривневих
support the
інструментів,
real
що
yield of
є
hryvnia
особливо
instrument,
важливим з точки
which is
зору нашої
especially
спеціальної теми
important
для
in terms of our
привабливості
today's
збереження
special topic,
привабливості
to
ОВДП і
maintain
облігацій,
the
щоб
ad-
вони
military
були
obligations and
дієвим інструментом для
or military
Міністерства
bonds and
фінансів для
state
залучення
bonds
коштів до
attractiveness to
державного
make
бюджету.
sure that the efficient tool for the
І
Ministry of
досі
Finance to raise
дохідність
money for state budget.
залишається високою,
The yield
вищою,
of
ніж
hryvnia
КНД, це
instrument still
перевищує
remains
інші
high,
депозитні
higher
ставки.
than real
В
inflation
листопаді,
and
як я вже
higher than
сказав,
deposit
інфляція
rates. In
прискорилася до
November
12,2%
2024, the
рік до
inflation
року.
accelerated to
В першу
11.2%
чергу, все-таки
year over year.
через зростання цін
First of
на
all,
продукти.
due to
Цьому
growing food
сприяє поганий
prices,
врожай цього року.
which is
Також
due to the adverse
продовжується
weather
зростання
impact of adverse weather
собівартості
conditions on
різних
the
товарів та
crop,
послуг, в першу
higher
чергу через
costs of raw
більші
food
витрати на
inputs and
забезпечення
other
електроенергією
services,
та на робочу силу.
primarily due to the growing cost of
Міжнародні
energy and
резерви
cost of
збільшилися
labor.
до
International reserves
39,9
increased to
мільярдів доларів за
$39.9
підсумками
billion
листопаду. Це покриває
in
5
November,
місяців майбутнього
so
імпорту, що є більшим
which
за
equals
такий
to 5
норматив
months
3
of
місяці,
import
тобто ситуація
coverage, which is
залишається
higher than the standard
стабільною.
value of 3 months. So the
Гривня
situation is
наприкінці
rather
листопада почала
stable.
трохи
In late
превалювати
November,
з
hryvnia slowly and
41,3
moderately
гривень за
depreciated
долар до
from
40,6 гривень за
41.3
долар
hryvnias
після
to
кількох місяців
41.6
стабільності. Але тим
hryvnia
не
per
менше
$1 after
високий
several
рівень
months of stability.
міжнародних резервів та
Nevertheless, high
впевненість
level of
НБУ
international
у тому,
reserves
що
and the
ситуацію
NBU
вдасться втримати під
confidence
контролем,
in
оскільки
its capacity
навіть в
to
тому
keep situation
самому
under
листопаді
control.
НБУ зменшив валютні інтервенції до 2,7 мільярдів
And actually,
доларів.
in
Це
November,
свідчить
NBU
про те,
reduced
що
currency
ситуація не є
interventions,
загрозливою
means
і
that the
надалі
situation is
залишатиметься
rather
під контролем
unthreatening,
регулятора.
and it will be
На
kept
цьому в
under
мене
control
все.
by the
Дякую за увагу.
regulators.
Прошу
That's it
тоді
from
слово.
me. Thank you so much for your attention. And now,
Дякую,
Gleb, the floor is
Максиме. А
yours.
я своєю чергою
Thank you so much,
передаю
Maxim.
слово
And now
Володимиру
I
Ланді,
happily
старшому
turn to
економісту, який
Mr.
представить
Volodymyr
ситуацію
Landa,
в
senior
ключових секторах
economist, who
економіки.
will
Прошу, Володя.
report on the situation in key sectors of the economy. Please, Vladimir, the floor is yours.
Дякую, колеги.
Thank you so much, Gleb. Thank you so much, dear colleagues.
Отже, ситуація в базових
So,
секторах і почнемо ми
let's
традиційно з
start with our sectoral
електроенергетики.
analysis. And our first sector is
Імпорт
energy.
електроенергії у
So
листопаді
next, net
фактично
electricity
залишився на
imports
жовтневому
unchanged.
рівні.
In November, it
121
stays at
гігават
October's
годин.
level of
Це включає
121
як
gigawatts
комерційний
hour.
експорт
And this is a result of commercial export of 163 gigawatt hour and commercial exports of 42 gigawatt exports. However, the commercial export is reducing, and the net export in November was recorded only during 5 days. The last time happened quite a long time ago, November 18, but since beginning of December, Ukraine has not commercially exported electricity. So in the right part of this graph, you see the illustration of it now. Ukraine mostly imports power due to significant deterioration of weather conditions. So the last relatively calm day allowed the energy system operators to perform current repairs, connect a few dozens of thousands of consumers who were deprived of electric energy due to the strikes by the Russian Federation, mostly in Dnipropetrovsk region and partially in Donetsk and Kiev region. But as I already mentioned, weather conditions are also a significant threat along with the Russian attacks, and many failures happen due to weather conditions. Scheduled electricity supply restrictions for residential and commercial consumers continue in Ukraine in accordance with the approved schedule. Most Ukrainians have prepared themselves for this situation, but the need for power is still growing. Now let's continue with the agricultural sector. In October, grain and oilseeds exports somewhat declined to 4.9 million tons, which means 5% decrease as compared to previous month's data. However, over 12 months, the export increased by 27% and reached 57.4 million tons. And as of December 6th, we also observed further increase by 37%. The main agricultures are same, it's wheat and barley. And we also continue undermining efforts only in November. Almost 25% of hectares this year were returned to agricultural activities. The mining operations continue, and there is a growing number of demining operators. 69 demining operators have been certified in Ukraine, and 58 more are in the process of certification. We also observed record-breaking performance of marine export. This during previous months, this figure, the share of seaports in agricultural export was lower than 81%. Now it's 86%. So let's talk about iron and steel sector overview. Here we observed a negative trend. Steel production declined for the 6 months in a row in November. After maximum values in spring, now this tendency further deteriorated. Now the steel production declined down 8%. And the pig iron production fell by 13%, and now it amounts to 541 and 556 kilotons respectively. At the same time, rolled steel production increased by 8%, but it's only due to the lower baseline for comparison, because the annual minimum value was achieved last month. In general, the good start of the year allows to maintain positive figures as compared to the previous year. So if we compare 11 months of 2024 with the previous year, we will see the growing production of the main types of steel by 18 to 23%. Also, let me emphasize that Ukraine exported a huge quantity of semi-finished steel products. These exports exported by 62%, and the total value is over $800 million. It's also important that Metinvest and Italian government signed a declaration on the construction of the steel plant in Piombino. The volume of investment is estimated as 2.5 billion euro, and a planned capacity of this plant is estimated as 2.7 million of hot-rolled coils per year. And traditionally now let's talk about IT sector. For 2 months in a row, the export of IT services continues to increase. So this time it increased by 20.5% in October and reached $532 million. And therefore, the 5% decrease recorded last month now reduced to 4%. The internal market is growing bigger. The number of IT vacancies increased by 31%. Here we also have a rather low comparative baseline. It's important limitation, but now it's 59,600 vacancies. And there's the greatest demand from companies is for employees with no work experience up to 1 year of experience. The NACE tops the list of hiring companies. This year they opened over 1,000 vacancies. So it's a company with a quite a large scale. It has quite a curious implications for IT engineers because fewer IT engineers plan to change jobs within a year. Only 17% plan to do it in the next year. And there is a growing share of people who plan to travel abroad in the near future or as soon as borders are open. It's estimated as 15% of IT workers. We can interpret these trends in various ways, but let's consider how the situation develops. And now let's move on with the fiscal sector. Thank you so much, Volodymyr. Next slide, please. Actually, about tax revenues. In November, tax revenues on the state budget reached the record-breaking number. So, as compared to November last year, it added over 38.5% year to year and reached 158.2 billion hryvnias. First of all, it happens due to the growing consumption taxes, which added 41%. But in October, we also observed the pause of the 4-month growth trend. And here it's important for us to highlight that growth, that domestic WAT revenues grow slower than export WAT, mostly through significant growth of VAT returns. This trend started in the first months of 2024, but during the last 2 months, refunds exceeded 15 billion hryvnias per month, which also affects the final performance. So the growth of domestic VAT is approximately at the level of inflation. Another concern is that according to the Ministry of Finance, there is underperformance of the customs service revenue plan. 87% in October and 79% in November. We don't yet have a total aggregated value for a year, but there is definitely certain underperformance. There are some legislative novelties. The president signed the tax increase package, amendments to the tax code of Ukraine, and we also expect some additional amendments which will actually introduce the military tax for individual entrepreneurs after January 1st next year. Actually, that's it from me about tax revenues. Volodymyr, please bring us to the next slide. Thank you. As for fiscal sector, the November was a good month for Ukraine. Ukraine received 6.5 billion of foreign budgetary assistance. And first of all, it's a loan from the World Bank, grants provided by the United States, and a bit smaller loans from Japan and South Korea, as well as another grant from Norway. There's another important news here. The United States confirmed that they will fund their share in ERI mechanism, and as long as I know, this money will be received next year. And confirmation of this contribution gives some extra certainty about sources of funding the budget deficit next year. and it contributes to better micro stability. Also, please pay attention that today, following 11 months, foreign aid covers 68% of additional needs of the state budget.
Більшість непокритих потреб на сьогодні покривається за допомогою
And most uncovered needs right now are covered by issue of bonds.
Дякую.
That's it from me. Thank you so much.
Єдине, що додам, поки що,
and the only
ми не
thing
підготували цього місяця, власне, аналіз
this month we haven't yet prepared the spending review because there is no yet published detailed breakdown for October. Thank you so much. Юра, and let us continue with our special topic and with our brief presentation of what we have and what are some of the key trends and changes in a budget 2025, because we move on to discussion with our guests. Let me give floor to Oleksandra Myronenko, our economist who has focused on this topic. So, budget 2020-2025, it's a fourth wartime budget and the first budget prepared within the framework of the medium-term budget planning as part of the budget declaration 2025-2027. In general, this budget is balanced and quite conservative. It uses conservative assumptions about economic growth and international aid. The macro prognosis provides for growth of real GDP for 2.7% in 2025. It's a bit more pessimistic than most other forecasts, while the National Bank of Ukraine expects 4.3% of GDP growth. It's important that the government expects that the military combat operations will continue until the end of 2025. However, due to high uncertainty and potential escalation of the military aggressions, these expenditures may increase in 2025. Social standards are frozen at the 2024 levels, so the minimal wage is at the level of 8,000 hryvnias. The standards were approved in April 2024. It's the first and for now the last change of social standards during wartime. However, if the state revenues improve, maybe social standards will be reviewed and increased. And the main fiscal risk is high dependence on foreign support. Here, let's take a look at the general public management sector, which includes the national budget, local budget, and the budgets of two social funds, namely pension fund and mandatory state social insurance fund for unemployment. The revenues in 2025 have reached 43% of GDP. Most of them are extra revenues, and they include the actions implemented upon request of international donors to ensure financial stability. Here we talk about fiscal consolidation and increase of taxes. These measures are important to achieve the increase of budget expenditures. These taxes continue to 59.2% of GDP, and like previous years, around half of these expenditures are used for repelling military aggression. This situation would be impossible without the situation of international donors, who for several years have provided large packages of economic and financial support through rent-based and loan-based support, which is now used to fund around 100% of non-military expenditures. Due to significant difference between expenditures and revenues, we expect the total deficit will be $36.5 billion or 19.4% GDP. However, its share of the GDP is getting lower. However, it still creates a threat for financial sustainability unless revenues increase in proportion to growing expenditures. So, So the planned level is 3.4 trillion hryvnia, so the nominal revenues increase more than inflation by 9.5% and are higher than inflation. Also, as own revenues show increase by 1.4%. Most revenues are own budget revenues, since budget 2025 doesn't include high share, and here we have a grant support. However, this amount may be adjusted next year based on remittance of this support. The key sources of own revenues are taxes. Tax collection is higher, and we expect that in 2029 it will be 28% of GDP, which is 2 percentage points higher than in 2021. The most dynamic growth is the personal income tax and value-added tax for import value-added tax, and an internal domestic value-added tax. Import value-added tax have increased by 17% nominally in hryvnia. Domestic increased by 10%, which adjusted per inflation means that domestic VAT income will almost remain unchanged in 2025. The most dynamic growth during the wartime is observed in the personal income tax and military tax. Compared to pre-war period in 2021-2025, they planned as $15.4 billion, and there is also growth by 3%, and it's related to refund and establishment of the rate, income tax rate for financial companies. However, at this time, the revenue is still decreasing. And if we compare it with 2024, we observe the highest growth from excise tax, which is due to growing excise tax rate for tobacco up to minimal level adopted in the European Union, and the total process is planned to be completed in 2028. As for expenditures, these expenditures are planned at the level of 5 trillion hryvnias or $111 billion. The funding of security in defense still remains the main priority of the budget policy, and this cost contributes to 41% of all costs of the general governmental sector. And the highest item is support of the army and half trillion hryvnias for development, procurement and modernization of arms. Since the war is ongoing, humanitarian needs continue to increase, and some of priorities of the state budget include social needs of citizens, and the expenditures for pensions in 2025 up to 384 billion hryvnias from state budget and almost 600 billion from social plans. The total amount of social expenditures in 2025 exceeds 1 trillion hryvnias or $24 billion. However, in general, social expenditures are going down. They decreased by 2%. They have decreased by 2%. We're talking about state budget expenditures transmitted to the pension fund also go down, but it doesn't result in decrease of the state budget deficit. In 2025, we also expect a significant increase of debt service expenditures. They now rank top 3 after military expenditures and social expenditures, and in 2025, $10.7 billion are planned in terms of debt service expenditures, which is approximately 29% of growth in hryvnia.
In 2025, the total financial need amounts to $53.8 billion, of which foreign financing needs $38.4 billion. And if we add the grant assistance and the rest of the types of the assistance in kind, then here we can say that the foreign financing need is $38.4 billion. And the need will be covered if we speak about it's 8.2% of GDP, and the general sum of debt has been increasing, and by the end of 2025, it will be 101.8% of GDP. There is the increase, nominal increase in hryvnia. That is why we don't have this increase in dollars, but we can observe the devaluation. And if we sum up, then $53.8 billion that should be covered from different resources, like including GDP for $580 billion, 580,000 hryvnia. And here we speak about the engagement of the international assistance from the international donors. And in late November, the budget was adopted for 2025, and the European Commission has allocated $15 billion and euro, and that is why we expect to get financing within the framework of Euro project, and G7 countries $50 billion, and their expenditures will be recovered using the Russian assets. And here we speak about the assistance from Canada, from the UK as well. Thank you. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you for this overview. And you can close your presentation, and we will come to the discussion part, discussing the budget, which has been successful and has been successfully adopted by Verkhovna Rada, despite the full-scale invasion of Russia against Ukraine. Today, we have the participants, Sergii Marchenko, the Minister of Finances of Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, for being ill, Roxolana Pidlasa will not be able to join us, the head of the committee of Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine on been responsible for the budget issues as well, but we are going to have a comment from our member of the supervisory board of the Center for Economic Strategies by Olena Bilan, and we are going to have the first deputy of Lviv, Andriy Moskalenko. Why have we decided to invite the representative of the government, of the local government? Because one of the greatest changes to the budget, this is the amendment and the shift of the policy of inter-budget relationships. And we start with the Ministry of Finances. Sergii, what is the total if we check this tendency? You can observe for more than 4 years, in 3 years in the full-scale invasion, and during all the period you've been the incumbent, what changes have you observed? Changes in the budget that reflect the changes in the state policy, in what we can see, what shifts in the policy of Verkhovna Rada and the government of Ukraine, what we can see as the shift in the budget of 2025, and what could we observe in 2024, and what is for 2023. If we observe this tendency, what shifts can we observe? What shifts can we notice? And I would like to hear from you the
Дня, дякую, Hlib,
tendency.
дякую учасникам, дякую за презентації.
a review. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, dear participants. Thank you for introduction. And as for the tendencies, and there are a couple of key peculiarities. Every year since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we have more possibilities to plan the budget, which should not be amended in the course of implementation or execution of this budget. Only once there were amendments to the budget, you know the reasons. Last year, it was 3 times in 2022. We have been amending the budget quite frequently. The situation, in most cases, unpredictable. We could not predict the year. We could not plan the year. We could not plan a month, a week. And now we can understand the challenges. We can understand how we form our indicators. And this is the thing that I would like to mention, thing number one. And from this, I should like mention point two. The greatest budget line is the defense spending. And we now have the understanding of what is the share of the budget we should spend for defense sector. In the conditions of the full-scale invasion, the finances allocated for defense must be enough for us to be able to maintain at least that intensivity and that campaign we have been having in 2024. And point three, being dependent upon the external financing. If we compare to the GDP percentage, as for the plans, we plan to decrease this rate, but anyway, practically, actually, we come to $40 billion, the need for the external financing. When the situation has stabilized there, and because of the full-scale invasion, we can understand how much we need to finance all of the budget lines besides the armed forces. And next point, point four, we quite carefully add or don't emphasize other expenditures besides the defense sector. Besides pensions, we do not plan to emphasize the salaries. It means that we, in fact, have some humanitarian area where we have some budget lines frozen and still some expenditures like social sphere, education has received additional 12 billion for the educational subvention, for example. And when we can, we add other areas which we believe are the most vulnerable in times of war, and we are limited as for our resources, and take into consideration the availability of such possibility, we can do this. So the budget is consolidated if we speak about the expenditures. From the point of view of loans, as you mentioned external loans, we have internal loans, and if we take into consideration the need to decrease, we have high volumes of 2024, and they've demonstrated us that each hryvnia of loan does not bring new expenditures, and we use the income profit to cover and serve such loans. And we have quite bright, vivid numbers, and which demonstrate that we must have a trend to decrease the dependence upon external finance. And because at this stage, it doesn't bring that additional profit or benefit as we had it at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Now, since 2025, we will be trying at least to stabilize the reloading, or that the trend we will observe in 2024. So the volume will be the same if we compare to 2024, but to increase, we will not be able to increase the reserves by means of external loans because it raises many questions about reasonability of such operations. If it's reasonable, definitely we will try to solve the issues, taking into consideration the reasons and justifications for such actions. And what I would like also to mention that indeed, what is really essential, there are the indicators and the tax customs demonstrates the results. We can see the tendencies. The tendencies now are getting worse. But I believe that generally the internal consumption and the consumption taxation can demonstrate the decrease, the increase rather than decrease. And the economy, at least in the component of trade and internal consumption and correspondent sectors, are in pretty good conditions. And we believe that the investments from the state to defense sector for ammunition purchasing uh, does support the improvement of such sectors, and the future such sectors will add to the added value. When we speak about taxes in 2025, probably I should stop here because these are the general things, and we can observe such trends definitely. Sergei, thank you so much. I wanted to ask a clarification question about the tendencies. Did I understand correctly that if we speak about a salary in the budget sector, if we would not review this, so the actual decrease of the income we have after the taxation, but the scope of incomes is the scope of financing that compares to this year, then in fact we increase the expenditures for ammunition procurement, for defense sector, and we move smoothly, slowly to that understanding of economy of war, which has been demanded by many stakeholders. And we are building the economy of war, having the global market economy in these circumstances, because the representatives of defense sector, these are also the representatives of private sector who have been developing in the conditions of market economy. We don't have any orders or restrictions from the state side. So here we have the industrial policy of the modern times. That's not what we form. We can see the demand, and those subjects, those entities can satisfy that need. And it's hard to expect anything else. And we were and are the developed democracy even before the full-scale invasion, and building planned economy and is impossible, and we won't be able to do it. And if we speak not from the point of view of only the property or the possession, if we speak about the industry producers, manufacturers, but when we pay attention to the fact that the consumption is strong, healthy, sound, what we can see in the that taxes paid, but at the same time we continue fundraising, raising donations for the radio location systems, for drones, etc. So do I understand you correctly that the budget for 2025 is the response of the state to this disbalance?
Знову ж таки,
Again,
тут треба розуміти,
here we should
що
understand
дуже
that
швидкоплинна,
very
змінлива війна і ситуація на полі бою.
fluctuant situation at the battlefield and in the state, and the state is trying hard to respond to the challenges as quick as possible, forming and redirect and referring the resources from one sector to another, trying to understand the tendencies which will be there in 2025. It's really a difficult task because we cannot anticipate with 100% accuracy what sorts of ammunition and weaponry weaponry there will be in 2025? What are the potential types of guns and weaponry will be required by our armed forces? We can only understand the general trends, and we need to respond to the trend, and we should be flexible responding to this. And last year, if we speak about the distribution of the expenditures between the sectors in the structure of the Ministry of Defense, we could see the tendency to decentralization of resource allocation. This is the trend one, and trend two. It's about in localities, for example, the brigade should receive more responsibilities and more freedom to allocate the resources as they can see the situation in the field. And the demand now we can observe, and the high demand for the drones, unpiloted flying aircrafts, and the demand should be satisfied. And if we can see and compare this with the beginning of 2024, 2023, for example, at the beginning of this year, even there was the demand for the ammunition. Now we have a greater demand for the drones and piloted vehicle aircrafts. And last question of this mini interview before I give it over to the rest of the participants of this discussion, and then probably I would give it over to you for the comments. That's the question, rather, about the details about 2025. We had emotional swings in the country and in this community of people watching the economy like everything we've done, we will have no money, we're dead. But then in a month, we could see that the demands for 2025 is covered, all the needs for 2025 are covered, and now we are ready to speak about 2026. So we have such swings from everything's bad, everything's great. So what are the needs are covered? What do we have the contingency plan for 2026? So for us to be on the same page, the same way, for us not to have any rumors about this. And here we should come from our responsibilities and commitments and the frameworks we are in. The International Monetary Fund program, which prescribes a couple of scenarios of actions and of events. So scenarios, what you mentioned today is 38.4 or 39%, depending on what calculations of what formulas we take as a benchmark. So we already have the resources, Ukraine facility, and the finances we get from either from International Monetary Fund, and this is the basic scenario. And here we have the possibility to distribute their incomes for 2024, 25, 26, 27, and we can cover the need we are having right now. And it's about the basic scenario and the negative scenario because we have some other risks, and they will demand some resources from us. We will have the need to increase and in 2025, and we will have access to IRA resources in 2025 to increase the expenditures for defense and ammunition. We have the costs, and we have potentially the possibility to flexibly respond to the events or happenings that can occur. And from the point of view of our internal resources, the budget is balanced, and I'm sure that it will do its job according to the budget.
It will be fulfilled according to the schedule. And from point of view external resources, we have basically have received the funds from the United States on the World Bank account. We have understanding of how we are going to receive the micro financial support. We are at the final stage of negotiations with Japan and Canada, and the United Kingdom also has already signed the agreement. So there is understanding. There is a certain certainty regarding the sources of funding. I would say these are some of the key points we need to remember. So if I understand you correctly, even in the worst case scenario, where you have additional need for military expenses, we won't find ourselves in a situation of 2024 when we need to review our budget and look for internal domestic sources of coverage. So basically, our basic scenario is a growing funding from ERA program. Yes, exactly. Okay, I see. Thank you so much, Sergei. And now, Olena Bilan, who's a head of research at the Dragon Capital and member of the CEC Supervisory Board. Olena, question for you. So you are investment banker, and you care and you probably have your own opinion about the coverage of Ukraine financial needs, because it's critical to identify our financial capacity as a borrower, and obviously it affects the price, the cost of our external debt. Do you agree with such an optimistic picture presented by the Mr. Minister of Finance? And maybe there are some concerning trends you would like to highlight, something we haven't mentioned today. Please, the floor is yours. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Well, let me once again emphasize what we discussed during a previous event. This is dozens of billion-dollar package is very positive and very critical for Ukraine. And it's not just because it's a huge amount of money, but also because we can dispose of this money depending on the development of the situation. Because actually 2025 is no more certain than previous years, especially due to continuing combat operations. So now we at least have some certainty that if the war continues, the budget will be fully covered. And moreover, we will be able to use extra resources for procurement or manufacturing of weaponry. I considered as a potential scenario we may face a need for doing so. So here we need to make a decision. Do we spend more today and save money for the next year? Well, obviously, when we are waging an existential war, the choice here is obvious. We need to spend more. We need to spend more today. And we will have a chance to do so. During previous years, we didn't have it because we received from international partners exactly as much as we needed. It happened with delayed and uncertainty. Today, the situation in this regard is much better because this funding is not yet received by Ukraine, but it's already received by the World Bank, this 20 billion. So there is a very high likelihood that we will receive them regardless of the development of events in the United States. So yes, in general, I have no special concerns about our budget. If we need to increase spendings, military spendings, I mean, we will be able to cover it using grant funds. Of course, it creates some extra debt while avoiding creation of extra debt load. As for impact on our foreign debt and the cost of it, right now it doesn't really depend on the situation with budget. The more important consideration is the situation on the front line. Financial markets greatly hope for some kind of ceasefire, but of course it's yet uncertain. The Eurobond costs indicate that the market estimates the likelihood of the ceasefire in the nearest future at the level of around 40%. So we need to monitor the situation. But I don't expect any budget issues in 2025. Unlike 2022, back then I wasn't sure about funding. The same situation repeated itself in early 2024. However, right now it's quite different. Back in 2024, you remember we had some uncertainty about our main partners, the United States. Okay, thank you so much. Let's have another round of discussion. Sergei is running out of time for us. So now I will kindly ask you to share some of your opinion on behalf of local authorities. I will kindly ask Andriy Moskalenko, the first deputy head of Lviv City Council. So the main changes in this budget is the return of reverse subsidies. Over the course of the last 2 years, the local budget of major cities were in profit. They spent significant money on supporting armed forces. Those who didn't want to do so just accumulated money on their accounts. And right now, we're dealing with a consolidation of the state budget mentioned by the Minister of Finance. Naturally, it's also affect larger cities. Andriy, how critical? Is it a critical blow for communities? And we talk not about such successful and well-controlled cases as Lviv, but let's talk about other communities you also know about as a representative of the mayor office. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. Thank you so much, Mr. Minister. I'm really happy to be here today. And I have three most important points, most important trends in terms of priorities. I think everyone understands that amidst the war, amidst the full-scale invasion, there is no such thing as easy budget and easy decisions. Every decision is challenging. And here the communications are of utmost importance. We need to clearly understand what our main resources. As a city, when we talk about next year to come, we have three core priorities. First one is our armed forces. We have allocated over 1 billion hryvnias to support the necessary procurements for military units both in Lviv and in other parts of Ukraine. It's a top priority for each and every community. And then the second thing is education and training. Approximately 4.9 billion hryvnias are allocated to various educational programs. I think it's obvious, it's an obvious priority, especially today. We understand how important it is. And then there is critical infrastructure. It's operation of heat supply system, water supply system. So the things targeted by the enemy today, everything they want to destroy, to bring terror. Right now, the budget planning process is pending. We expect to approve this budget on next Thursday. Yesterday, we had a public presentation. So we always have this public presentation practice. We discuss our priorities. We listen to feedback, discuss any issues, adjust our plans. And as for budget trends, well, the budget definitely will be less than we initially planned. Based on preliminary estimates, we expected 16.3 billion hryvnias. It's going to be 14.4 billion hryvnias. It's a lengthy discussion about reverse subsidies. For our city, it's 1.9 million hryvnias, but the decision is already made. So I don't think it makes any sense to discuss it any further. Yes, indeed, we have lost two. We need 2 more billion hryvnias to make sure that our budget is in balance. So we will be raising funding. We will be looking for solutions. We will definitely keep the funding of armed forces. We cannot reduce our social standard and social expenditures because we have a number of programs for veterans. We have a number of successful programs where we cooperate with ministries, where I really appreciate our colleagues, the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Digital Transformation. We cooperate in military technologies. And we have special grants for innovative developments, which are very successful. Colleagues mentioned it. Mr. Deputy Minister mentioned it. So we need to invest in what can continue to generate revenues. And the main tax for our city, from budget filling point of view, is 55% of personal income tax. And within this context, we know that if we talk about sources of funding, on one hand, we have tax revenues, and on the other hand, we definitely have to attract loans so we can have a development budget. As of today, we don't have it. in terms of numbers, so we will request seek approval from the Ministry of Finance for loans, because right now we find ourselves in a situation where we have a problem and we need to seek for a solution. I don't think that we need to talk long about it. Everyone understands what the budget is. Last year, the military personal income tax was removed. This year, it's a reverse subsidy. Well, it's very important to make sure that this money are spent to support the communities who need this support the most. We actively discussed this issue. So right now we are finalizing a decision to attract the funding for these expenditures we need to maintain. And the only thing we are going to initiate, we're going to discuss with the ministry. Well, when we may take loans, we want to simplify the loan process itself, because right now the procedure is as follows. We need a specific project description.
Минулого року працювала дещо простіша процедура, але я думаю, що ми в спільній праці зможемо знайти рішення, яким чином
if we join our
мати
efforts,
максимальну
then we can simplify this procedure. And next aspect concerning the international finances, we have been actively working with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, with the donors, we work with the partnering cities, and we understand that the budgets are complex. We should search for solutions, and we should stay in touch in communication, trying to find the ways out, the solutions. And the last point I would like to mention, we have one more issue concerning the Hromadas communities, the middle-term loans, 160 million hryvnia. That's for Lviv community, different sums for different communities. So we hope that this sum will stay in the city budget, because we have some commitments we have to fulfill. This difference in tariffs is not economically reasonable now, and it should be 1,600,000,000. And owing to the position of the ministry, we could preserve this in the communities, but it's only 550 million. The rest should come from the budget. And we can understand that, and at the end, I would like to mention that Lviv today is a difficult comparison, is complex comparison. Do you have problems with the connection? This is the city which has definitely it's a peaceful city in comparison to Kharkiv, for example. That is why we have some commitments like development of ecosystem, rehabilitation ecosystem. We invest much into this. We assist people with the relocation, and we carry out these responsibilities, and we are ready to collaborate with everyone. And it's really important to communicate and to resolve those issues that arise. Every hryvnia invested can help to create jobs, can help others. This is what we focus upon, to be short. Thank you. Thank you, Andriy. Sergei, I would like to ask you, before you leave, in the context of those questions raised by Andriy, and a huge change we have hardly mentioned, it's important, but it's a technical thing. And we discussed this with Denis Lutin during one of the events. That's creation of the new framework of management of investment projects. How? What are the changes will be there for the budget expenditures and for their structure and quality for the next year? And in fact, those policies at in the localities like in Lviv, they plan to use the finances of creditors and grantors for the developmental projects. What do you think about it? And take into consideration how urgent the issue of reconstruction is, we have some normative changes in place for the budget next year. We have the experimental margins, but in parallel, we have prepared the amendments to the budget code, which will be discussed in the parliament, offering new framework for investments, and in particular, those public investments. And we come to the issue whether we have norms for the concepts of the projects
мають
which are supposed to
один канал заходу,
have one channel,
від того,
entry
чи це
channel,
регіональний проєкт, чи це
whether
проєкт
this the
державного рівня.
regional or the
Єдина система
state
оцінки такого роза
project,
проєктів різними міністерствами.
and different ministries will give their evaluations,
залежності від
and
пріоритетів.
definitely financial will
зручно,
depend
я
on the
точно
priorities.
визначений
It's convenient
пріоритетами самим урядом,
to identify
тому що є
priorities
дискусія всередині
of
уряду,
by
що
the state.
важливіше,
There is
бомбосховище
internal
чи
prioritization.
ремонт
What is more important,
шкіл, чи
shelter
ще
or
щось.
innovation of
Тобто, мовно
schools?
кажучи, є розуміння,
And
що
we have the
без урядової
understanding
дискусії можна
that
визначити
owing to those
пріоритети
discussions,
публічних
we
інвестицій.
can identify the
І для
priorities of
незалежності від
public
цих
investments.
пріоритетів
And then, depending on those
спрямувати в першу
priorities,
чергу фінансування з
first of
боку
all,
державного бюджету,
financing from the
загального фонду
state
державного
budget,
бюджету,
the
підтримувати
gen
такі
fund of the
проекти.
state budget, we can
І в
support
другу
such
чергу,
projects.
це,
And
напевно,
secondly,
основне,
and maybe that's the main point,
сформувати
we can
довіру наших
form this
донорів, партнерів
trust of
в
donors, of
частині
partners,
спрямування їх ресурсу саме
when
на
we
ті
speak about their
пріоритети, ті проекти,
resources
які
being
уряд
allocated for
визначив
those
як
projects
такі,
and being
що мають
directed for those
отримати
projects
підтримку. Там
which
є
should be
регіональна
supported.
компонента,
We have the
і
regional
в тому
component
числі для
there.
регіональної компоненти ми
And as
передбачили
for the
ресурс для підготовки саме
component,
проєктів.
we have the resource to
Ну і
prepare the projects.
в
And
залежності
depending
від того,
on
чи є донор і на
whether
фінансування
the
цього проєкту,
there is the donor to
всі
finance
ці
this or that
проєкти
project,
будуть
all of the
отримувати
projects
відповідну
will
підтримку.
receive the
Звичайно,
support.
ми
And
вважаємо, що зараз
we
ключовий фокус
believe
має бути
that the
здійснений
key
на
focus must be
напевно, післявоєнну підготовку
on
масштабних інвестиційних
post-war
проєктів,
preparation of the
які
large-scale
далі
investment
буде
projects,
фінансуватися за
and then
рахунок
it will be
спільно
financed
наших партнерів,
jointly
бюджету України.
by us, the
Тобто це
budget of
не,
Ukraine
знову ж
partners.
таки, якщо
And
взагалі дуже спростити,
if
це ми
we
виходимо від
simplify
ручного
this,
управління інвестиційними
we
проєктами,
come from
коли
the
у нас
manual management of
чомусь
the investments.
за регіональним признаком раніше ділилися
Beforehand, we
окремі
had
регіони, отримали
distribution by
преференції, потім за
regional
галузевим принципом ділилися певні галузі, які були
principle.
потужні, отримали
Then we
преференції.
spoke
Зараз
about the
є
industry
розуміння,
principles.
чому
Now we
саме
have the
цей
understanding how we
проект
should
або
distribute
концепція
this. And
отримує
now we have the
підтримку.
understanding why
Я
this
вважаю,
that
що така
project or
система,
concept
вона
has to be
зараз це
supported.
в тестовому режимі
And now we are
запроваджена, але
testing
в
this. We are
майбутньому
having the
створить
piloting mode now.
транспарентність і довіру
And then
в
it
частині
will create
прийняття
the
такого рішення.
transparency and trust when we speak about
Дякую.
decision making.
Ми проговорили
Thank you.
основні питання.
We've discussed the main
Висновки є зрозумілими. Бюджет
points.
Олена дуже добре сформулювала,
Olena
що
has
побоювань
clearly
щодо загроз
mentioned
збитки
the
бюджету
fears.
набагато менше,
As
ніж
for the
попередні роки
budget, there are
повномасштабного
much
вторгнення.
less
Мене
fears
порадувало те,
about
що
the budget for
на щонайменше
2025 in
сильні
comparison to the
громади,
previous
такі
years
як
of the
Львівська
full-scale
громада,
invasion.
мають свій
And
план
Lviv
щодо
Gромada
того, як
has
забезпечувати послуги
their
своїм
own
громадянам,
plan
навіть
how
в
to provide
умовах
services to the
змін
citizens,
і
even
обмеження
under the
ресурсів на
conditions of
користь
restricted
загальнонаціональних
and
потреб,
limited
таких як оборона.
costs
Чудово,
when we
що
have
наші
the greatest
міжнародні партнери
expenditure spent for
теж
defense as
виконали
it
свої
is required.
зобов'язання і
That's great
вчасно
that
нам
our
забезпечили
international partners have
цю
provided us timely,
передбачуваність. Я думаю, що на цьому
provided
ми
us with
можемо
this
на сьогодні
possibility
завершити.
to forecast the
Я дуже
future. And I
дякую
believe we
всім, що
can
ми в такому
finish today with this.
сконцентрованому
Uh,
режимі проговорили.
We have discussed this in the
Наша
concentrated mode,
детальна
and
записка
our
про
detailed note
проект і вже
about the
спочатку
project,
проект вже зараз
and that was the
закону про
draft
бюджет на
budget,
бюджет на
and now that's
2025
the
рік з
final
нашим
budget for
аналізом
2025 with our
доступний на нашому
analysis
сайті,
is
лінк
available
є
on
в
our
чаті.
website, and you have the
І
link on the
читайте, і
website, and
знайомтеся,
read
ставте
it.
наступні
You're
питання,
welcome
і
to ask your
чекатимемо
questions, to
вас
read,
на наших
and we are
наступних
looking
заходах.
forward to
Я
see
дуже
you during
дякую
our next
Сергію,
events.
дякую
Thank you so
Андрію,
much, Sergei,
дякую
Andriy.
Олені за те,
Thank
що
you,
ви змогли
Olena,
приєднатися
for
до нашого
you've joined
обговорення, і
us
дякую
for
колегам за
to
їхню роботу.
discuss these
Всього
points. Thank you,
найкращого.
dear colleagues, for your work. All the best to you.